Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move along to multiplying and dividing rational expressions. So what we're going to do is a quick review of multiplying and dividing numeric fractions. So let's just multiply 3/4 times 12/18. Okay, so sometimes students and teachers will reduce right away. Other times, what they'll do is they'll multiply through, then reduce. It's truly up to you, but remember, with multiplying and dividing fractions, you do not need a common denominator. Basically, it's numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Okay, once you got it multiplied, what you should do is break it down into its prime factorization. So 3 times 12 becomes 3 times 3 times 2 times 2, and then 4 times 18 becomes 2 times 2, then 2 times 3 times 3. So then what you can do is you can start looking for those ones that we did when we were simplifying the rational expressions. Okay, notice that everything divided out on the top. We only have a factor of 2 left on the bottom, so our answer is 1/2. Okay, when we divide, the definition of division is multiplication by a reciprocal. Okay, so when you divide two fractions, let's just change this to a division problem. We're actually going to change the definition or change the problem by that definition of division, multiplication by a reciprocal. So we're going to multiply 3/4 by the reciprocal of 18/12. Then what we do is we do the same thing we did before. Again, we don't need a common denominator. Okay, so 3 times 2 times 3 times 3, that's our 3 times 18. Our 4 times 12. And then we look around for those ones. Okay, so we have 9 over 2, 4, and then 8. Okay, so notice that it didn't just reciprocate the answer when we changed it to division. Okay, all right, so now we're going to make it a little bit tougher. Okay. So we're going to start with monomials. Okay. So monomials shouldn't require factoring because there's no addition. So we'll do, let's see, a to the third, b squared, c to the first, a to the sixth, b to the first, times a, b, c over c to the fifth. Okay, now, since there's no common denominator, basically what you do is you just kind of glue these together. Now, a lot of you can probably do the shortcuts for the rules of exponents, but let's say you don't remember those. Okay, so if you don't remember those, you got to do it the long way. So how many factors of a do you have? Well, you have the 3 here and then 1 here, so that makes 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 2 b's, then 1 more. Then 2 c's. So what I'm doing is, and I'm doing this kind of the long way, I'm actually writing out all of my factors of a, b, and c, so I can actually tell where my ones are. Okay, so let's see. Lots of stuff is going away. It's dividing out. So on my numerator, I have b squared. And then I have a squared over c to the cube. And then I am finished. Okay, now not much changes if you do division, except remember division is multiplication by a reciprocal. So you are going to have to remember to find the reciprocal of that second fraction. All right, let's try something a little bit harder. Monomials are usually fairly straightforward. Okay, so let's try something a little bit tougher. Let's try division. Okay, I'm not going to worry about excluded values. Okay, so we want to ask ourselves, okay, what operation do we have? This is division. No, I do not need a common denominator, but I do need to multiply by the reciprocal. So that my problem becomes 1 over n plus 1 times 5n squared plus 35n all over 5n. Okay, so the trick is to kind of choose your work. So usually what I do is I just kind of glue everything by multiplication like this. So 1 times 5n squared plus 35n really doesn't change much. But notice here what I'm doing is I'm not multiplying this out. Okay, I'm not going to distribute that 5n to that n plus 7 because that's actually going to create more work for me as I move along. So I look at the numerator, I look at the denominator and say, can I factor something out? So on the top, I can factor out a 5n. On the bottom, I left it factored. Okay, so now I'm looking for matches. Okay, notice that everything divided out, so my answer is 1. Okay? All right, let's try another one, a little bit tougher. Again, the better or quicker you are at factoring, the easier these tend to be. Okay, it just makes life easier if you're quick at factoring. If you're not quick at factoring, it's okay, but you know, it just makes your life easier if you are. So let's look at something that has to do with multiplication, but looks super scary. So on the top, I've got 12a to the third plus 30a squared over 3a squared times 4a minus 12, 4a squared minus 2a minus 30. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to factor it first. Okay, so I'm going to go and factor the top left numerator, the bottom left denominator, then the top left or top right numerator, and then the bottom right denominator. Now, please be aware that I factor kind of fast because, well, I got way more experience. Okay, and that's the only reason. I've had a lot of practice. Okay, all right, so looking at the top, I notice that 12 and 30 have a common factor of 4, or excuse me, not 4, 6. And then they also have a common factor of a squared. So I'm going to go like this, 6 a squared. And remember, when you factor out a greatest common factor, you're dividing. So it's 2a plus 5. All over, well, 6a squared is a monomial, so it doesn't factor. All right, next one. 4a minus 12, notice that that has a common factor of 4. Like that. Okay, so divided out of 4 out of each and every one. Now, okay, so this one, the bottom right denominator is a 4a squared minus 2a minus 30. So I have a small problem, is that I have a greatest common factor and then I have a trinomial. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor, which would be 2. So I get something like that. Now the problem with stopping there is that 2a squared minus a minus 15 is still factorable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor this right here again. Okay, so just for clarity, I'm going to rewrite my problem. So now I have this. Okay, so now I'm going to factor 2a squared minus a minus 15. So okay, now remember, I've had a lot of practice factoring. Okay, if we need to do a mini lesson on factoring, let me know and I will more than happily make one. All right, so now, since this is multiplication and I don't need a common denominator or anything, I can just multiply top times top, bottom times bottom. Okay, so what that looks like technically is this. Now, some folks will rearrange so the monomials and the constants are all in the front, which I do at the very end. I don't do it in the middle of the problem. Okay, so now I'm going to look for things that match, things that I can reduce. So let's see here. Right away. I have that. Then I have that. And then I have that. So it looks like I have 4 over 2 left. So that would be a 2. And there's my answer. That's it. All right. So now let's try something that looks awful. Okay, but it's still a division problem. This is called a complex fraction. A complex fraction is just a division problem, is all it is. Okay. Okay, so I actually find these easier to do if we do them with just, algebra-based ones. So let's do this one. I've got 36 over x plus 2 divided by 1 over 6. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to find that big division bar, which is right here. Okay, and then we're going to rewrite your problem. We're going to write it like this. 36 over x plus 2 divided by 1/6. Okay, now it looks a little bit more normal and not so scary. So since it's division, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so now that's a multiplication problem. Now I have 36 times 6. 36 times 6. Oh, goodness. I have to do some scratch work. Sorry. $236 over x plus 2. And that's it. Okay, so let's see if I can come up with a more difficult one. Oh, that'll work. Let's try this one. Now, there are shortcuts to this, but I do not like those shortcuts because you lose the fact that you're actually dividing. Okay, these aren't, unless they get super complicated, they're not too long of problems. Okay, if you're more than comfortable with the shortcut, then that's fine. I always like to write it out just so I can keep track of what I'm doing. Okay, so my division bar is right here. Okay, so I have a over 2a minus 3 divided by a squared over 2a minus 3. So again, we're going to rewrite that as division, or excuse me, multiplication, multiplied by the reciprocal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply top times top, bottom times bottom. Okay, so notice I have matches, so now I have a over a squared, which if you're okay with the rules of exponents, you can go ahead and reduce that right now. If not, whoops, you might want to do this. To have a 1 over a, and that is your final answer. Okay, alrighty. So the next operation we will cover is addition and subtraction.